think it's on yet.
I think we are ready to begin. We welcome everyone to Antioch Bible Fellowship. We are looking forward to a wonderful session with Ask the Doc. We are grateful for, amen, the opportunity to host and to be with you tonight. And I'm going to get out of the way and I'm going to turn it over, amen, to all of those individuals who are tasked with making this program a tremendous success. We look forward to your participation. And again, welcome from Antioch Bible Fellowship. Amen. You're right at home.
What about this? Fantastic. All right. So, working through a couple technical difficulties, but we're going to make it work, aren't we? Thank you all for coming out tonight. It's wonderful to see so many people here in person. Yeah, thank you to Antioch Bible Fellowship and Pastor Frank White for hosting us and letting us host this evening's Ask the Doc Town Hall. This is a series that we have been doing now for almost 2 years throughout the COVID pandemic, answering questions and addressing the needs of community members. So we are just thrilled to be here. We're thrilled that you all joined us. So let's get started a little bit. I am Dr. Rashida Monroe. I'm a pediatrician and medical educator at WakeMed Health and Hospitals. I also teach residents and medical students from UNC and Duke. So that's my day job. And as we enter this fourth year of the pandemic, we've seen that the toll on our emotional wellness has been increasingly apparent. We shifted to working from home and the isolation that caused, the constant stress of the pandemic, the uncertainty of the virus. It's left a lot of people feeling overwhelmed and burnt out and stressed. We've lost loved ones, we've had the financial strain, and just a general sense of unease that's taken a toll on our mental health. We've seen a rise in depression and anxiety and other mental health issues throughout this pandemic. So it's crucial now, more than ever, to prioritize self-care and our mental health and seeking support from loved ones, mental health professionals, and other organizations dedicated to providing mental health resources. And together, we can help each other navigate this challenging time and come out stronger on the other side. So tonight's discussion will be around emotional wellness during the pandemic. We have a local expert here today, and we will try to help provide insight on understanding the emotional toll, living through the pandemic, and managing common mental health concerns. The other thing we have to consider is that the COVID pandemic brought a wave of misinformation, confusion, fear, and harm, false claims about the virus, its origins, treatments, spread rapidly throughout social media and cause some distrust with health information and sometimes healthcare professionals, and cause people to make some decisions that actually put themselves at more risk. And misinformation can make all of this worse, the stress and anxiety of it all. Across Wake County, COVID-19 has had a devastating impact on the mental health of individuals across Wake County and across the globe. According to recent data, there's been a significant increase in reported cases of anxiety and depression. Since the start of the pandemic, that has increased almost 30% compared to pre-pandemic levels. So it's important to note these things and note that they're not evenly distributed, that Black and brown communities, marginalized communities have disproportionately been impacted by not just the health effects, but the mental health effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So with all of that being said, let's get started so we can have a discussion, answer questions. I'm thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Stephanie Etienne. She is a medical director and family physician with WellCare of North Carolina and a longtime contributor to COVID-19 efforts and the Ask the Doc Town Hall series. Thank you, Dr. Etienne, for being with us. So we'll begin our discussion with some of the questions that you have already sent in. And if you are attending this event in person, there'll be an opportunity for you all to also ask questions during the event. In addition, if you are viewing this through Facebook or YouTube, you can put any questions that you have into the chat, and we will be able to field those questions as we go. So, Dr. Etienne, my first question for you, what are your general recommendations for people to help improve their well-being and wellness? If you had to break it down to maybe 3 or 4 important things for people to focus on, what would you have them focus on?
Thank you, Dr. Monroe. The first thing I would like to make sure people are aware of is that you have to be aware of your current mental status or your current situation. Sometimes they assume that they're doing well, but you have to really look at yourself and say, am I where I need to be? In most cases, we are not. And some of the biggest things that impact our mental health are our physical health. Are we doing what we need to do to stay physically healthy? Are we eating right, eating healthy, a healthy balanced diet? Are we taking the time to stay physically active? Are we keeping up with our routine health care? Are we going to the doctor only when we're sick, but not when we need to be screened for health conditions? And one big thing that is prevalent in the African American and the Hispanic community, people tend to put their mental health to the wayside. Mental health is as important as physical health. So the time you take to go to the doctor for your physical appointments, we need to also be getting mental health checkups. So those are the things that I feel are most important.
Thank you for that. You touched on a couple of important things. I call it joyful movement. I don't like exercise because that sounds hard and boring to me, but I like to move my body in a way that feels joyful. And so that can be dancing or swimming or playing basketball if you like it, whatever. But moving your body in a way that feels joyful, I think, is really important. You talked about eating a variety and a balanced, healthy diet. Healthy diet also can sound intimidating to me, right? Because it gets hard to know, like, what's healthy, what's off limits, what's good, what's bad. I like to think about eating a variety of foods, and I'm a pediatrician, so to kids I say, eat the rainbow, right? That fruits and vegetables and all the foods on your plate should be the colors of the rainbow. If everything on your plate is white or cream or light yellow, you're not getting the variety that your body needs to stay healthy. So I think about moving in a joyful way, eating the rainbow. And one thing that really gets ignored and we take for granted is adequate sleep. And I cannot say enough how important it is to get enough sleep. And again, as a pediatrician, as a mom, we see that kids before the pandemic weren't getting enough sleep, and it has gotten dramatically worse since the pandemic, whether that's increased screen time, just disrupted schedules. I know we're trying to rein all sorts of stuff back in. The pandemic kind of ended up being a bit of a free-for-all for screen time for us in my house, because it was like they're in virtual school and they can't go out and see friends. So getting enough sleep is so important to your physical and mental health. So if you're always getting an hour or two less than your body needs, you wake up, your alarm goes off 3 times, you kind of finally get moving, and you seem okay. You're tired doing, right after lunch, but you seem okay. Chronically doing that over and over and over and over, like many of us do, can lead to problems with your mental health and physical health. It can increase rates of like diabetes and obesity and anxiety and depression. And if it does that to us as grown-ups, imagine what it's doing to children whose brains are still forming and developing and growing. So I like to think about, like, if I only could think of like 3 things, and maybe I'd add a 4th, maybe I'd add like being in community. Talk about that, Dr. Etienne. What do you think? What's the importance of being in relationship or community?
Being in community is tremendously important. And community can look like different things for different people. You all here, most of you are a member of this congregation, so this is one example of a community. Faith-based organizations, other clubs and organizations that you may be affiliated with. You don't have to be in a formal group to have community. Neighbors, friends, any group of people who provide valuable support. And so it's important that we not remain isolated. Even prior to the pandemic, many people tend to sort of stay to themselves or maybe just with their family unit. But it's important that we do support each other. And we can see from the pandemic, we all depended on each other pretty much to survive. So being connected to community can help you mentally. And it's really even more important, I think, for our young people. Being in school clubs, sports and other activities where they can be around other children. With the pandemic, most of our children were isolated or at home for probably over a year and a half. They were homeschooled, and many teenagers, even prior to the pandemic, they tend to like to be by themselves on screens. And with the pandemic, that was magnified. So now it's even more important that we get them out away from the screens and with other people, because that is a breeding ground for mental illness, depression, and anxiety when you're isolated. And when you're isolated, nobody knows what's going on with you. You can be depressed. I mean, you can be anxious. You could even be suicidal. And people may not even know because you're so isolated. We can't forget how important it is to be attached to some form of community, because it's essential really to our mental health and physical health.
Thank you for that, and thank you for talking about different examples of what community may look like. It's different for different people. I think the simplest form of community, like you said, is family. And I mean, that may be your the family you chose, the family you were born into, or the family you made, your friends. And I like to think of family meals. It's so important that on a regular basis, we're coming together around food. Usually that's an enjoyable time. It's a relaxed time. It's a time of conversation. And so, if you're with your family, whatever that looks like, and meal times, whenever you guys are together, whenever your schedules align, end up being people, grabbing their plate and going back to their room or going to sit in front of the TV, my challenge to you is to switch it up. So turn the TV off, turn the screens off. Don't let people go back to their rooms to eat in isolation, but sit together around a table, eat together whenever you can as a family. Talk about your day, reflect on what was good, what was bad, talk about feelings, Doesn't have to be anything special. Doesn't have to be a fancy meal. Doesn't have to have, fine china. It could be a pizza out of the box sitting on the floor, okay? But have family meals and check in with your family. Perfect. Okay, we have a question. We were talking about, eating the rainbow, eating a variety of food. But are there any vitamins or supplements, Dr. Etienne, that you recommend that people regularly encourage or incorporate into their diet to promote wellness, or is it kind of more based on needs?
That's a good question. The first thing we need to look at is trying to get our nutrients from what we eat. That's the best source of nutrition. So starting off with what we mentioned, a healthy, balanced diet is essential to staying healthy. However, there are some vitamins and supplements that may be beneficial. It's good to talk to your doctor before starting any supplements or vitamins, because there are some conditions that it may not be wise to take vitamins or supplements. You may have interactions with medications. Not all supplements are good for you. Some things you may not even know what's in those things. But for the most part, just a general multivitamin can potentially be helpful for most people. But there are other things, such as vitamin D. Most people are vitamin D deficient. So it's highly recommended that people take vitamin D supplements, even children, even babies who are breastfeeding can take vitamin D supplements because it's essential to overall health. Vitamin C is good for the immune system. But even with all of that, it's important to have discussions with your doctor because you don't want to take anything that may potentially be harmful or interact with any medication that you're taking or make any medical problem that you have worse.
Thank you so much for that. What do you think? So let's say someone's sitting here listening and they're going, I think I might be depressed. I might be anxious. This is all ringing fairly true for me. I feel isolated since the pandemic. I haven't had community. What does someone do? What would you recommend? Where would they start?
First, it's good that people acknowledge that they have a problem. That's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. Many people may think they have a problem, but they're embarrassed or ashamed to come forward and try to get help. If you think that, you're just not feeling yourself or you could be feeling better, and in most cases, we all can be feeling better, but when you're not the way you should be, the way you used to be. You're not as happy as you can be, or you're more anxious than usual. Things just aren't right with you. If that is the case, if you have a doctor, it's good to contact your doctor to talk about these things, maybe make an appointment. They may refer you to a psychiatrist or a therapist, but it's not good to just sit and wait. As soon as you think you have an issue, get some help. If you don't have a doctor or you're not really sure that you should go to your doctor, talk to someone that you trust. There are plenty of people who are going through the same thing, and they probably are afraid to even mention it. But it is important that you try to get help. And if you or someone that you care about are going through like a mental health crisis, meaning you're severely depressed or anxious, or you have thoughts of hurting yourself or someone else, you really need to try to get help more urgently. And even if you don't have health insurance or a doctor, there's still ways to get help. One of the big things you can do, there's a mental health crisis line for the state of North Carolina. Just like we have 911 for medical emergencies, we now have a 988 for mental health emergencies. So remember that number, because you may not need it now, but there may be someone who needs help. You can call that number 24 hours a day, and there are mental health professionals available to talk to you. They won't judge you. They won't tell anyone that Sally called and said this. It's confidential. They can be there to support you and keep you safe and connect you to resources, you or your loved one, valuable mental health resources, even if you don't have health insurance. Yes, that's an
excellent question. I want to say that louder so everyone can hear. Thank you for saying that. You mentioned a few things that people might notice if they were feeling depressed. But can you talk about that a little more? What are some of the symptoms of depression that people might not realize this is what depression is?
Sometimes it's hard to really pinpoint whether you're depressed. And if you've been feeling a certain way for so long, you may think it's the norm. This is how you've always been. But it's not normal. It's not normal to want to be by yourself all the time, to feel hopeless, just feeling like things aren't right, to not feel joy in most things. Most things should give you joy. Things that normally make you happy, you don't have any regard for. Some people may start to eat more. Some people have no appetite. You may feel like your mind is kind of slowing. You're not able to think or concentrate. You may feel like you're moving slower or you're just in a funk, so to speak. And when things, unfortunately, some people do get to a point where they feel like they don't want to live. They don't have any joy in life. And that is a dangerous situation to be in. People of all ages, children, we're seeing a higher rate of suicide, unfortunately, in people of all age groups, and more so in our young people, even more so since the onset of the pandemic. People are feeling hopeless. They haven't been connected to anyone. They don't know how to make connections anymore. We have teenagers and young people who were home for almost 2 years. They were not socializing with others, and they sort of forget how to connect. They have to kind of be taught how to connect again. And one thing I really want to make clear, don't assume that people are okay. Please check on people. The person who you think has it all together and they're happy, a lot of times those are the people who are not. They're going through things. And I would even say that even if you think everything is okay, and if you think your kids are okay, 9 times out of 10, they are not okay. And it's important to reach out to their doctor. When they go for their physicals, the pediatricians will bring up, how are you feeling? But if for some reason they don't, bring it up with the pediatrician and have your pediatrician really talk to them, even without you in the room, to see how they're feeling. It is tremendously important because even if you think you're okay, you may find, hey, this is actually not normal. And it doesn't have to be that way for anyone.
Thank you for talking about some of the symptoms of depression. I also think about trouble sleeping sometimes. That can be a sign or a symptom. And in children, another thing that I might see is like anger and irritability. And you're right. We as pediatricians are always screening children for mood problems. And it's not as simple as, how you doing? Right? Because what's the answer going to be if you ask your teen, how you doing? Fine. Everyone in here said it, fine. You got to ask more questions, all right? And so we do screening tools and dig deeper. When's the last time you did something that you enjoyed? Who are the people you like to connect to? Have you been having trouble sleeping or concentrating? We're going to dig deeper. But it's really important to keep an eye out for those things, or even, again, for yourself, noticing that things aren't the same as they used to be. What about the online tools, Dr. Etienne, that have become more widespread, like BetterHelp or Psychology Today, I think? Do you ever recommend to your patients? Because, sometimes being connected to a therapist can be challenging, right? It's like time and distance and all these different barriers. But one good thing I think that came out of the pandemic was the ability to connect virtually. For some people, that can make a huge difference in their ability to access a therapist and mental health professional. Tell us about that. Do you refer patients to therapy in that way, or even to to try either psychiatry or psychology or therapy that way?
I absolutely do. I think it's a great resource. We currently have a shortage of mental health professionals, very few resources for mental health. And sometimes people have barriers to getting to a mental health professional. Even if they have insurance, they may not have transportation. You have other things like work. You have to take off work. You have your family to manage. Virtual mental health visits or just online tools are very helpful, and they're convenient. I think whatever way that is most effective for someone to get help, go for it. Some people prefer in person. Some people will prefer to do it online because, hey, I don't have to take off work, or I don't have a car or transportation. You can get pretty much the same benefits online as you can in person, and there are a lot of resources available for that.
What about meditation and yoga? When people say mindfulness and meditation, what does that mean? And do you think that that could be a helpful strategy?
I think meditation and mindfulness are both hugely beneficial. And what we mean by mindfulness is just being aware of your current state, being aware of what's going on around you. From our day-to-day hustle and bustle, we don't appreciate simple things in nature, things around us. Just focusing on those things and kind of separating ourselves from just general stressors that are around us and being aware of how we're feeling in the moment. A lot of times we're just so used to the hustle and bustle, rushing, going to work, that we're not even aware of how we feel or how we even fit into our current environment. So mindfulness is important. And meditation is hugely beneficial. That can be done anywhere. People may say, oh, I don't have time for this. I don't have time to meditate. Who has time to sit and meditate? Meditation can be just closing your office door or sitting in your room without anyone and just taking 10 minutes to just close your eyes, relax, and just totally focus on your well-being and not be distracted by everything else that's going on. Just clear your mind, pretty much. That can be done anywhere. So there's really no, I guess, excuse to not, take time for yourself, even in terms of exercise. We talked about exercise. You can go for a walk during your lunch break. You can take the stairs, park further in the parking lot. Little things add up, and those things are also important for your health.
Thank you. I love those practical ideas because, again, as a busy working mom, when I hear exercise, I'm like, oh man, like set aside time and gym membership and all this kind of stuff. But what I've started doing recently is sometimes I will just get up from my seated desk, and I have a standing desk, and I'll just spend time standing while I'm on a Zoom or typing something. I'll be doing some squats and some calf raises. I'm just moving my body a little bit. At lunch, I eat a little, I talk less. I don't eat faster. I talk less. And then we take a lap around the hospital complex, but it all adds up. And so you're right. There's lots of different ways that we can do that. Meditation, prayer, mindfulness. For me, that usually looks like calming music. I have a hard time with meditation because quiet is hard for me. But with music, with some peaceful music that puts my mind at ease, I can spend time and what for me is mindfulness. So those are some good ideas. There's also the Calm app. If anyone has heard of that, the Calm app that you can get on your smartphone that can talk you or walk you through some really easy meditation practices and mindfulness. But I've heard a lot of people say really great things about that. Okay, I want to open this up to the audience. If you all have questions, we are going to have you come to the microphone and ask us. First, I would like for you to introduce yourself.
My name
If you are a student, I want you to say what grade you're in and something you enjoy. Go ahead.
My name is Azariah. I go to Anglo. I'm a sophomore. No, I enjoy playing basketball.
My name is Amir. I go to Mary Phillips, and I enjoy playing football.
Fantastic. Thank you, guys. What question do you have?
As a teenager, how can we help other teens find something positive about COVID?
That's a really good question. That's not where I thought you were going with that. Find something positive about COVID. Well, I mean, as hard as COVID has been, I do think some positive things have come out of it. For my teenagers, I have a 16-year-old and a preteen, a 12-year-old. Online school, virtual school was not their favorite thing. And I think when they came out of that and they were able to return to their activities, I think they found a lot more joy, and they were a lot more grateful because they didn't have that for so long. I think there's a lot of gratitude to be had in returning to their sports, seeing their friends, summer camps, all the things that were on pause for a good 2 years. But I want to hear from you. What do you think is something good that's come out of COVID? Use the microphone for me.
I met a lot of people online.
I like that. Are you able to connect with them now that you're able to connect with them in person? That's great. Awesome. Thank you for the question. You don't have a question for us? Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, that's a good question. So, this is something that Dr. A.T. and I have spent a lot of time over the past several years working on, or 2 years, I guess. But the question from the audience was, how do you talk to someone who's against taking the vaccine? Dr. A.T., I'll let you start.
Well, that's a very good question. And I'll first start with saying that since the onset of this pandemic, in the United States alone, we have had over 100 million cases of COVID. And we've had over 1 million people in this country die due to COVID. And there are millions more who did not die, but they are suffering the long-term effects of COVID. They have heart problems, they have had strokes, many people are disabled, people are suffering from mental health conditions, and this is what we call long COVID. COVID is not something to play around with. In many people, it's a mild disease, but in a significant amount of people, there are long-term effects and potentially death. The vaccine has been the only thing that has been shown to significantly decrease the risk of death and serious illness. The facts are there, the science speaks for itself. We would not be at a state where we are pretty much almost, I guess, out of the pandemic if it was not for the vaccines. The first year of the pandemic was dreadful. We can both speak to that. There was no vaccine. We didn't know what to do with this virus. But thanks to science and research, we know that there's something that is widely available, something that is free. In most cases, it's free from people. The vaccine is free. Anybody who wants the vaccine can get the vaccine. The vaccine has been found to be safe in all age groups, people with various health conditions, people as young as 6 months can and should get the vaccine. It's safe in pregnant women. It has kept people alive. We see as physicians the difference that it has made in our patients. I do urgent care work, and I see from the start of the pandemic, people were really going down like flies, dying. There was nothing to protect us. And it's a shame that, we have something that can protect us, and to not take advantage of it, you're asking for problems. I mean, it's been proven to be safe and effective. And I encourage everyone who has not been vaccinated to get vaccinated.
Thank you. I think you said it all, really. I guess one thing that that I will add is or reemphasize is that, sometimes people in the beginning were all like, this vaccine is new and we don't know. We have vaccinated tens of millions of people in this country and hundreds of millions across the world. Like we have a lot of data and a lot of evidence about the safety of the vaccine and that it decreases your risk of serious illness or death 3 to 4 times, 3 to 4-fold. That's a big deal. Big deal. So, thank you for that question. Do we have another question from our audience? I won't make you say what grade you're in, but do tell us your name and something you enjoy.
Okay. My name is Diana Powell. I'm Executive Director of Justice Serve in North Carolina. I work with the homeless population, and my concern is even with COVID, a lot of our people got displaced. So it left them in hotels trying to cope with children. And so when I see the effects of mental illness and how to bring that subject up, how do we say, well, maybe would you be interested in going and seeking counsel or something like that? In the Black community, that's kind of something we kind of stay away from. And then what I've noticed is a lot of our Black community, especially among our youth, they turn to the drugs, substance abuse. They feel like the weed and other things that help them cope. And I'm afraid that will increase our crime rate. That will increase our youth being entangled in our criminal justice system. So my question is, as a person that's in the position that I am, how do I suggest? What is the language I need to make those suggestions?
That is an excellent question. Thank you so much. What a thoughtful, excellent question. I'll go first, and then Dr. Etienne, I'll let you follow up. But as a physician, I really try to normalize. I may start with a lot of people have been feeling this way, or many of us, because I have had, feelings of anxiety and stress and all these different things throughout the pandemic. So I try to make it relatable and normalized, that this is a common thing and you don't have to suffer alone. Just because it's common, just because we might feel this way, doesn't mean that we shouldn't seek help, that there isn't help available. When I talk about this, and all of my patients are from Black and brown communities in the clinic in which I practice, we try to make referrals and connections to our community organizations who have people that represent us in our community, who, for our Latino patients who speak Spanish, who are culturally competent. For Black patients, oftentimes we feel like we can relate better to people who look like us and may understand what we're going through. And so we try to make those connections to community organizations that have good representation. So that's how I think of it. Anytime you ask someone and you can cause some feelings of shame, right? To say like, just asking them without kind of normalizing or reflecting that, many of us have those same feelings. What other thoughts do you have, Dr. Etienne?
I agree with everything that you just said, but I also like to frame it in a way, like when I'm talking about other things, say if they have high blood pressure, like, how things been as far as that health element. And I say, we talked about that, but, what else is going on with you? How have you been feeling mentally? Have you been feeling, are you okay? Just coming out, are you okay? Are you happy? Just to give them a chance to kind of, open up and say, hey, things aren't as good as I would like. And just reaffirming, and like Dr. Monroe said, normalizing, feelings of anxiety or depression, and, mentioning, with the pandemic, people may be experiencing, feelings of just being down or depressed or feeling like things just aren't going the way they should. And that's a normal thing. Just giving people, an avenue to speak, speak their piece and just be able to communicate with you and just to be open and let them know that it is okay to speak and be receptive to what they have to say.
Thank you. A follow-up from that, and I like how you mentioned that sometimes in the Black community, that's not something that we want to talk about, something that we want to address. Also, sometimes within our faith communities, that's not something that we readily are willing to seek help for. And so there's a question from Marcellus in the audience. How can the faith community help address some of the fears in the African American community? And I think that is a really important and really good question. I also think, and Pastor White, if you have something to say about this, I would love for you to come up and say it. But I think that, again, normalizing that. I mean, from the pulpit, talking about what many of us may be dealing with. I mean, when you don't talk about something and it's hidden under a shroud, it can cause a lot of shame and secrecy and feel like it's a moral failing, right? Like I don't have faith enough, or I don't believe enough, I didn't pray hard enough. But if you had diabetes or cancer, I wouldn't say I want you to only pray. I want you to pray and, right? Right, that's right, prayer without works. And so I think talking about that in our faith communities, in our small groups or youth groups or wherever, just to normalize that. But I see Pastor White did come on up. Thank you for answering my call.
Thank you, Dr. Monroe. Again, what a blessing it is to have you all here tonight. One of the key things for me is to approach life holistically. We've had a number of issues, and even from a pastoral standpoint. As a pastor, you're constantly absorbing, you're constantly taking on things, and the reality of it is that I am flesh and blood. I have my own issues. I have my own mental health things that go on from day to day. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed. It's throughout the biblical text. David talked about when I'm overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. But the sheer reality of it is that this afternoon I received a call from a member asking me to pray for her family. Her niece did something, and she said, will you please make sure that you continue to pray and get the word out? Her niece committed suicide. And the magnitude of all of these issues, the magnitude of all of these things, and for a moment, the pastor was just at a loss for words. What can you say? What can you do? When we look at all of the things that have been happening on our university campuses, NC State in particular, but it's going on around this nation. And there is an epidemic within the pandemic. There are things that are happening all around. And for me, I feel that as a practitioner of faith, it is important for me to keep it real, to have those moments. And even now, last year, our theme was traversing through the trauma, going through how do we get from where we aspire to be, get to where we are to where we aspire to be in our best selves. And yes, faith is a key component, but I am realizing that there is the importance of having a team of individuals in your life. I am a pastor who will, amen, affirm the right that individuals, you can have a counselor. There is a need. Counseling is valuable. Amen. There are things, amen, that we must realize that in the grand scheme of things, that we are, amen, human beings. We all have frailties. We all have challenges. We all go through changes. But at the end of the day, I want to make sure that I utilize those resources, and I want to make sure that I point those who I am tasked to pastor to those resources, whether it be a psychologist, whether it be a psychiatrist, whether it's a medical doctor. Amen. Yes, I'm going to pray for you. I'm going to pray for the Lord to heal you. But at the same time and token, I believe, amen, it's important to be holistic in this. I hope I didn't go too long.
It was
Bless you.
perfect. Perfect. Thank you so much. That was excellent. I appreciate that. All right. Do we have other people who are ready to ask questions? I see our students and former students. Again, I won't ask you to say what grade you're in, but do tell your name and something you enjoy.
Okay, I am Pastor Toshiba Rice, and I enjoy reading and research. My question is very simple. It is, how many boosters are we supposed to have, and how long are we supposed to go before we get the consecutive boosters that we should get?
That's a fantastic question. Thank you for asking that. I think a lot of people have that question. It was like, get your first and your second and your third, and here we are. So, Dr. Etienne, can you talk about the bivalent booster, and what is the final word on how many boosters you're supposed to have or when you're up to date?
First, I want to say, especially for those who may not be vaccinated, you need to get your what's called your primary series, which usually involves a series of 2 vaccines. The most common brands of vaccine, of course, are Pfizer or Moderna. Those of you who are vaccinated may have received those. So once you have received that complete series, you are considered fully vaccinated. But fully vaccinated may not mean fully protected, because as you know, the virus mutates and changes. And that is the reason why we have the boosters. And after you've had that, what we call primary series, and after you have been determined to be fully vaccinated, with time, the effectiveness of that vaccine decreases. Just like with any vaccine, with most other vaccines, sometimes you have to get what we call a booster to boost up your immunity. So the boosters, it depends on your age. There are a lot of factors that determine how many boosters you get. The average adult, healthy adult, would be required to get the primary series, which would be the initial 2 vaccines. And it depends on when you receive those vaccines. If you received them earlier on, you may have been required to get more. The key takeaway is getting the most updated booster, and that currently is the bivalent booster. If you are a person who has multiple medical problems, who has a weakened immune system, who is elderly, you may have required up to 5 total vaccines. But at this point, the most updated booster is what we call the bivalent booster. And what that is, it has components of the regular or previous vaccines that we received, and also what we call, I guess, an update that covers some of the variants of COVID, like Omicron. Omicron causes about 80% of our current infections. So that bivalent booster protects you against all of the other variants and has a special emphasis on the most common and most infectious variant, the Omicron variant. Now, even children can get, and young people can get the vaccine and the booster. Children as young as 6 months can be vaccinated. Anyone over 5 years of age or over will qualify for a booster. So you can be boosted as young as 5. So if you have children who initially got their first 3 vaccines, for the younger people under 12, they require 3 vaccines for their primary series. If they have received those, they will require a booster if they are over 5. So you have to make sure they are up to date, based on, if they receive those boosters, they still will require a booster. It depends on when you received your last vaccine.
So that was a lot of information. The most simple way that I think about it is when you've had your primary series, you had your first two, doesn't matter how many boosters you had after that. If you don't have the bivalent booster that came out in September of 2022, then you're not up to date. Everybody needs to have had their bivalent booster. Even if you're over 50 and you had booster number 3 and 4, and everybody needs to have had their bivalent booster. So you can get that out everywhere. Walgreens, CVS, Walmart, your physician's office, Wake County, everywhere. Okay? And so that is available for everybody. Even the 6-month to 4-year-old, that third dose now is a bivalent booster. So that's available for everybody who can get vaccinated. Okay? Does that answer that question? Okay. Ooh, we have another question from our students. Okay, students, so you want to tell us your name, what grade you're in, and something you enjoy.
My name is Kimberly. I'm in the 11th grade, and something I enjoy is playing soccer. And so earlier you mentioned the long-term effects of COVID, like, such as losing your sense of smell or taste. So my question is, like, are they treatable? And what can you do to get those senses back?
It's an excellent question. Thank you. And you also have a question? Is it related, or should I answer this? Should we answer the first one?
You should answer that.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so Dr. Etienne, you mentioned some of the effects of long COVID. What would you say to people who have lost some of their senses of taste or smell, or are having symptoms of long COVID? What can they do to get better?
Well, first of all, as far as losing the sense of taste or smell, most people will eventually get those senses back. It may take months to get them back, but in some cases, it may not be the same, quite honestly. It may take longer, or you may not be able to taste certain things or smell certain things. It is good to be connected with a physician in these situations, because there are things that can be done, sort of like retraining your senses, so that you can potentially learn to re-smell again and re-taste again. You're usually challenged with various tasting different types of things and smelling different things to sort of reprogram your neurons pretty much to be able to sense those things again. And we have come to the point now that there are so many people who are suffering from what we call long COVID. There are clinics that are dedicated. Unfortunately, we have to have clinics that are dedicated to treating these patients because they're so complex. We have people who have heart failure now, who've had strokes, who aren't able to, who are on oxygen now, people who are healthy, even young people. It's not just old people who may have already had medical problems. Anyone can develop long COVID. And even people who may have had mild symptoms of COVID can develop what we call long COVID. And mental health issues can be considered a symptom of long COVID. So that's one thing that we tend to see more than anything, and people may not realize, like what we were saying, that they are experiencing symptoms of long COVID. And they may, have other issues with maybe feeling like they can't concentrate, they have brain fog. Those are symptoms of long COVID.
Thank you. The thought of retraining my brain to learn how to smell and taste sounds challenging, but I do know people who have regained those senses, so it can get better. Thank you. Our second student, and this will be our last question before we wrap up. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Draylise. I'm a junior at Southeast Raleigh Magnet High School, and something I like to do is volleyball. And my question is, because of COVID, how are doctors and nurses able to adapt to those new changes?
That's a good question. How much time do we have? Just like everyone, we were faced with a challenge without much warning, without preparation, without ever having experienced that before. And we quickly tried to put, policies and procedures and things in place to help keep us safe, to keep our families safe, to keep our patients, community safe. We're constantly learning and seeking out information to make sure that we stay up to date and we're informed and we can inform people the best we can. But just like everyone, we had to adapt to the situation. For some, that has been, for all of us, it's been extraordinarily stressful. But for some, especially people who were in ICUs and emergency departments, and we're really kind of bearing the brunt of this at the worst of the pandemic, it has been overwhelming to the point that some people have left the profession. For me, it has been helpful to be in community. So with my fellow physician friends and pediatricians, one of the things that we did that actually brought a lot of energy and comfort to us was the vaccine effort that we all did together, where we finally felt like a year after the pandemic started, we had a tool where we could fight back, that we could be a part of protecting this community and beyond, and helping to save lives. So that actually, from those efforts that we did together, out of that grew a beautiful friend group and relationship for many of us who worked together, including Stephanie and I. And so community, that was a new community that we were able to build. But there's that community again, and that's been really, really important for me and a lot of other people. What else, Dr. Etienne?
I can't say it much better than what you said. Everything she said, and also to add, it was imperative that we prioritize self-care. We had no choice. We had a tremendous responsibility. We were basically soldiers who were not equipped. We had no vaccine. We didn't know what the heck we were dealing with. We had to lean on our faith. That was a big thing for me. Lord, help me, because I can't do this. Jesus, take the wheel, literally, because there was nothing I could do. There are things I could do, but I had to lean on a higher power, because if I didn't have that, it would have fallen apart, because there's nothing I can tell you to really help you understand what we went through with this pandemic, especially myself doing urgent care work. Didn't know much about this virus. I'm seeing people who are sick, coughing all over me. I didn't know what I was going to bring home to my family, if I was going to get this virus and potentially die myself. There was no vaccine. So just being able to, lean on my faith and prioritize my own sanity and self-care was paramount to being able to survive the pandemic. We had no choice, because we had to be here for our patients. When we became physicians, we had to step up and be prepared. By any means necessary, we had to find a way. And thank God we were able to do so.
It's the perfect way to end. And you made me a little bit of emotional because, we're in 2023, and when I think back to 2020 and 2021, it feels like a decade ago, but it was just a couple years ago. And we've been through so much. We've survived that together. And we've been there for each other. But there is some trauma in what we all endured and the things we lost. And so it's important for us all to make sure that we are kind of reflecting and thinking and being grateful, being grateful for what we have and what's new and changed and different, and what good things came out of the pandemic, but also that we are still here and we still have each other and we still have community. So there's a lot to be thankful for, but also a lot to recognize that we survived. I just want to say thank you all so much. Excellent engagement and questions, and we just really appreciate you being here, being a community for each other. Again, thank you to Pastor Frank White for opening up this church And for the beautiful words that you spoke. We're so thankful. Thank you to everyone online who contributed and asked questions. But again, I'm Dr. Rashida Monroe, Dr. Stephanie Etienne, signing off. Good night.